The Bank of England has been in the news in recent times and has been largely criticized for its benchmark and also for the model when it comes to economic forecast. Looking at the activities of the MPC and also interest rate in England, it has also been of concern. What will be the implication of these as regards to UK economy? I'm glad to let you know that the wise man is back. We're being joined by Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze, who is here this morning. Glad to have you join us on the next thing this morning.
Femi, good morning. My pleasure to be here. Blessing. Good morning.
Welcome back.
My pleasure here.
So, it's been a while. Glad to have you back in the studio. Of course, you've been with us.
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Now, let's start, by looking at the module for economic forecast that we are making reference to Bank of England. Now, globally is a practice whereby you do economic forecast. But in recent time, that of Bank of England has been in the news, largely criticized, making reference to what happened, after COVID and then the Russian, war and Ukraine war. How do you react to these, and why do you think this discussion is very crucial now that MPC is considering some activities in regards to the UK economy?
Yeah, as a student of social science, there is one very important pursuit, and that is the ability to evolve a grand theory that is able to explain happenings around the globe. And to the best of my notice, there's no scholarship so far that has been able to advance that grand theory that will be able to explain some certain things that happens. And this is the challenge that policy makers do have when we have models that explain some scenarios, forecasting and saying, oh, this is kind of projections are going to come, but based on certain models. Now, those models are based on some presuppositions. Like they say in centralist parables in elementary economics, all things being equal. But we're living today in a world where nothing is equal. So this is the real fundamental issues. And I think this is why a lot of people are asking top economists in the world to look at reviewing the model for forecasting, to be able to see how near accurate we can be in terms of projecting what the outlook in a nation will be. We're dealing with a very unique set of generation right now. And the generation who we deal with, the rational actor model theory, which is, of course, one model in the social sciences that seems to explain that every human being bases their judgment on some certain rational thinking. So we're seeing a generation that is near irrational in terms of choices and the things they do. And they are driven more by emotion than actual reasoning. So this is a problem. So you can really not determine what's going to happen in the near future. And also don't forget too that we're also living in a world that is aging. And a whole lot of things happen. While everybody was thinking things were going to be normal, for example, all of a sudden we get into the pandemic. And there was no any announcement that COVID was coming. And then COVID came, the entire world was disrupted. The entire supply chain was frustrated for over 6 months and nothing was moving. And therefore there were a glut in terms of movement of goods and services. All these things are happening right where we're in the world as we speak. Then, of course, we thought that, COVID was getting off and a whole lot of things were trying to settle down. And then the Ukrainian-Russia war started. And of course, in a globalized world where, of course, we are all interconnected, it is difficult to have a happening in any part of the world that would not constitute some shocks on the global outlook of the economy. I think these are the issues, of course, that's really affecting policymaker to be able to determine what's actually happening. But for me, I think a lot of theoreticians are far away from the realities of the things that really are plaguing the world. And I think also affect us as a country. When, of course, the last MPC meeting and we're trying to raise rate, for example, And this is, of course, we're saying the CBN is trying to control the money in circulation. So you deal with money supply so that you can manage inflation. But the problem the world is actually having is not so much of cost or demand push inflation. Now we're having to deal with real supply issues. If you look at it globally, productivity is at its lowest ebb. So when we're looking at GDP and its growth, you see it only at the upper echelon, not down the chain. So at the bottom, a whole lot of people are either doing nothing really. Because what is driving the world today seems to be different from what it used to be. You take, for example, in terms of transportation and commuting today, if you go to most advanced economy, nobody wants to buy a car or own a car. Nobody wants to own a phone. I was talking with a friend of mine in Kigali that day, and he was telling me, that he wants to start a project so that when you're going for a conference and you're traveling from here to the United States, you travel light. All you do, like the way you order Uber, you can order your suit and just wear for your conference. And when you are going, you drop your suit and your bag is light. And that helps. So people are thinking. So there's a shift in terms of lifestyle, the way people consume. And this is also affecting all the plannings and the thinking of those economists who sit at MPC meetings to determine how the economy outlook should look like. That's my view.
All right, the case of England seems to be peculiar because some of those factors that you've mentioned resulting in high inflation rates also affected other countries. But what is different about England? If you check the inflation rate for England, it's at January, it was about 4.0, higher than France, higher than Germany, even higher than the Eurozone and the US. So what is particular about England?
Yeah, there are a few things you need to know. The United Kingdom case today is not something that is, for me, that beats any human being's imagination. You remember that why the Brexit debate was going on, whether United Kingdom should remain in the Eurozone. There were a whole lot of issues, and they were all basically economic thinking. And the fact that you see there's a lot of pressure coming from poorer European countries and putting pressure on the English economy. And because when you look at it today, look at the volume of trade, for example, import-export from UK to the Eurozone is about 48% apiece. So which means UK is taking almost a half of what is produced in the European Union countries. And so they are also sending almost half there into their economy. So that interlink is still there, even though there was this Brexit. But here, this is a problem in UK. And I think this is also a global problem that I have always advocated that, you see, productivity is a function of what each individual in an economy is doing, not a collective. UK is a social market economy. And what this means is that you allow free markets. You also put measures on the ground to mediate the market. So the market is not having a free rein. And this is important because you have to appeal to some certain people in the interest and look good in the face of people. And what does this mean? You are taking more than you can chew. And you find out that in the last 30 years, investment, for example, in critical infrastructure, even including education in the UK, is going down. And of course, there's a correlation between investment in education and high level of productivity within the economy. So this is the issue. So when you are having an economy that is not productive, of course, what you're going to find will be this exact thing. So you can compare UK with Germany, for example, where, of course, they have high level of productivity in terms of investment in education in Germany and even in France.
All right. When it comes to economic forecast, let's revisit the issue of the model again. What are some of the factors that determine, what the model could look like globally?
Well, I think there are very basic factors that you look at. You are looking at they call it environmental scanning. You look at the environment and see what are the possibilities in terms of conflict. How might this affect the supply of goods and services across the globe, because we are connected? So the forecasters are looking at what is happening to the weather. For example, are we forecasting and expecting more rain or lesser rain? And if there's lesser rain, how is it going to affect agricultural productivity, for example, across the globe? Would there be a shortage of grain or something? Or we are going to have abundance of grain or less of it? Now, all these things are what are computed to estimate what is likely to be the outlook for the economy. So if we're seeing there's a build-up of a crisis, for example, as you see the back and forth between Palestine and Israel, and somebody is thinking that, look, who wins this election, next election? If this person or this party win, we are likely to be able to predict the outcome of his policy regime. So all these things are factored into the computation of the expectations of the economy. US is going into an election. And we know that if Donald Trump wins, for example, there will be a 180-degree turn in the economic policy of the United States toward other nations of the world. So we're seeing a Donald Trump that is likely to be inward-looking than outward-looking, as against a Joe Biden that wants to see how to collaborate with other trades. So once, of course, you're seeing that you are seeing this man is projecting the internal economy and protecting it from what is coming into this place. You see, okay, we are looking at what is the volume of trade of China into America. What will happen if Donald Trump becomes a president? Will this trade be happening? So all these things are the things that you put together to be able to say this is how the economy is going to look like in terms of supply and demand for the year that is to come.
All right, so in trying to manage the economy of UK, the Bank of England actually increased rates, and this they did consecutively until it got to 5.25%. Currently now, economists and even the financial markets are asking for a reduction in rates. Do you see that happening? If the increase of interest rates has not helped the inflation rate, is it time to bring it down?
Yeah, but this is the exact point I'm making. When you see that policymakers are looking at a reality that is before them, and what is this reality? Is that they are saying that inflation is climbing. But what is the actual driver of inflation? So the old model of analysis just says that what drives inflation is money supply. So if you have to control inflation, you have to control money supply. So once you can reduce the amount of money in the economy, then you are able to actually manage the inflation. But there's no people paying attention to the components of the nation's GDP. Now, take for example, you look at your local economy here, and people are talking about there is so much money in circulation. In whose hand is this money? That is the obvious question that policymakers are not asking. Who is having this money? Now, if you have a population of, like the UK, where you have over 60 million people, the real GDP money should actually be in the hands of about 10% of the population. Now, most of those 10% of the population buy luxury goods. What is happening to the 90% who are down the bottom of the range? They don't have money, so they can't buy. So the common goods that we are producing is in the market, and they are not able to access it because they really don't have the real money in their hand. This is the situation that nations need to evaluate. And that is why for a very long time, even in social sciences, people have argued about using the GDP to really determine the basis of the economy. They say, oh, your GDP is this percentage. Now, but how do we extrapolate whose hand this GDP really is here? So when we say Nigeria GDP is $2,000 per person. Blessing, if I ask you, do you sure you have $2,000 in your bank account?
I wouldn't say anything. I do not want to be kidnapped. That's why I want anything.
so this is the real issue. So what we're doing is that we're looking at the sum total of what is produced in a state divided by your population in a particular fiscal year, and we say this is the GDP. So what this is assumed that even those who are unemployed within your population are having $2,000 in their hands. That is unreal. That is not the way to be able to manage or measure your economic outlook. Because you are having a lot of people who really are not having up to that. How many people in Nigeria, even this, for example, the CBN governor just came and told us, or the finance minister recently, and said that over 80% of Nigeria don't have up to 500,000 in their bank account. So it gives you an idea that when they say, for example, Nigeria has about $2,000 GDP. Now, who is this person that's having $2,000 GDP? In an economy where, for example, your minimum wage, for example, is less than $50. So, how do you have a minimum wage of $20? Now, you are talking about people having $2,000 as GDP. So, this is the error in the calculation of nations' economic potentials. So we must be able to break it down, know that the people, this is in the hand of certain people, and these people are living in certain level, and this is the kind of goods that these people are going to consume, and this is good. So when you are increasing your rate, for example, what that means is that you're actually adding to the burden of the already poor. That's what it means. So you say, oh, because there's so much money in circulation, we want to reduce the money in circulation, so we increase the interest rate. Now, if SMEs are accessing this fund in the bank, what happened to the increase? They pass it on to the final consumer. And now this is the already overburdened and poor consumer. What do you have? The goods is there. They don't have money to buy it. So this is why you're seeing, for example, even in the UK now, you're taking an, they say, inflation is going down. But you're seeing a stagnant output. It's not corresponding that when you see inflation go down, you are thinking that a lot of people are going to be buying goods. But people don't have money to buy goods because the pounds is not in their hands to buy. So the economy is stagnant. So what we should be thinking, and I think what globally people should be thinking, is to see how do we empower people so that they can really become more productive in terms of adding value, and then they can actually earn this money and they are able to make purchases. So when economists sit down in MPC meetings, they should be able to put these indicators on the board and see, okay, we are making a policy. How is it going in the long run, in its ripple effect on the already poor people in society, as against looking at, you are taking money out of society. You are taking more money out of the hand of Dangote, it makes a lot of sense. But when you say you are taking more money out of my hand, you're only killing me.
All right. One of the issues being referenced in this story is the looking at the activities of the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee in UK. Now, the practice is for them to meet every 6 weeks, unlike in Nigeria, which is once in 2 months. But they've been largely criticized, because of their projection related to the inflation rate. Now, let me read to you a comment made by one of the economists. It says, at present, the MPC issues are a collective forecast of inflation and other indicators, though these can be masked internal differences of opinion. And so, the expert is making reference to the discordant tune among the MPC, whereby experts don't even agree, but eventually they come up with some figures. How do you react to this, and what will likely be the impact of this?
I'm trying to use a local scenario to paint a picture so that you can get this very clearly. If you go to my village, for example, 10 years ago, if you are coming to the city, if you were a visitor. They'll give you 2 bags of yam, plenty. They give you a gari sack for free. You are not buying it because they have it in abundance. Now, if you are traveling to that village now, you should be ready to go there with some 2 bags of yam and with some sack of gari so that you can feed the aged people that are living in there.
Why?
Because there's been a drift from the urban rural to the urban center. And the able-bodied men like me who should have been doing farm to produce that yam that will be given out for free are in the city, actually doing nothing. Either unemployed or underemployed, whichever way. And so we're not contributing to that economy. Now, don't forget that when we are mapping out the economic outlook of a state, we're looking at both rural and the urban area together and taking an average of what everybody is doing at the level of productivity. So this is the challenge. You see, you sitting down here, you know the number of dependents, whether they are family members, whether they are friends, whether they are church members, who are relying upon you and sending text messages on a daily basis for the support. So yes, you're actually earning SY amount, but by the time you put the paycheck on the ground and you discover that it's not even able to take you home because there are a whole lot of people who at the moment are not productive. This is the issue. And if you don't deal with that issue, all the pontifications, speculations will amount to nothing. So when elite economists sit down in a room, you know, there's a joke that's been going around in Nigeria recently. The Fadeyi and the Ikoyi economists model in Nigeria. You are seeing people in Ikoyi making foreign policy, financial and economic policy for people in Fadeyi, the place that they have never lived before. Because when they are thinking that everybody is living in Ikoyi. That is a problem with elite economists. Because they are not in touch with the reality. And so we sit there in a cozy environment of the bank and we are saying, oh, we are looking at this issue, it's going to go like this. We are looking at this issue, it's going to go like this. But we're not looking at the internal dynamics, especially in the rural drifts. We're not looking at what is happening in terms of productivity. How do we actually manage or measure these expectations to see, okay, if we plant rice today, yes, in Israel, for example, there's precision agriculture that you can determine what your yield will be. But I don't think that is global. So it's also possible that nature intervenes in some of all these speculations. And then all of a sudden we say there was going to be rain today, and now there is no rain. So the forecast can't be real or true. So I think this is the issue that they also must know that they are human. And actually moving into the realm of the divine to be able to see tomorrow cannot be as accurate or scientific as people will want to believe. And that is why Bernanke says, you see, in measuring that expectation, you have to factor in some certain things. You factor in nature. You factor in luck.
So you leave certain things to chance.
Oh yes, to chance. Because it's just a prediction. It can or it cannot because you don't have all the facts.
So where does this leave economists and even economics as a study? Before now, there were economic principles guiding an economy. It had been applied before now by various countries and it had yielded results. Right now, it doesn't seem to be working as it used to be. So for economics as a study, where does it leave it?
Well, I think the realm of the economy really is to look at the events of yesterday and use it to project the things that are likely to happen tomorrow. So it does not make economics a divine activity or a prophetic discipline that you can say precisely with exactitude what's going to happen tomorrow. So any attempt, and that's why I started by saying that in the social sciences, not just economics alone, political science, psychology, sociology, there is this drive to develop a meta-narrative, a theory that can explain everything. But that is within the realm of the divine to be able to say what's going to happen tomorrow. So, but economics, as scientific as we may say it is, I was arguing in a seminar recently that the objectivity of science is itself subjective because it is based on certain assumptions. And these assumptions are calculated by men who are also fallible. So when we say 1 + 1 is 2 and we say it's objective, what makes it objective? It's because somebody says so. And the person who says so is basing it on certain assumptions. What if those assumptions are not there? So it can change. So to me, economics is speculative. We can't take it, even the normal hard science, they are speculative to a very large extent. And that is the reason why sometimes when we receive facts, we need to examine those facts. I was saying to my wife last night, he was giving me some prescriptions, and I said to her, the last time I was at the general hospital when my mother was to pass, and I saw doctors, they were saying, oh, do this test, do this test. And I said, they did one same test in the same lab 4 times, and they had 4 different outcomes. And I looked at the doctor in the face, and I said, you see, even medicine is subjective. So we must accept our humanity. And nobody should come out to tell us that, oh, I have all answers and solutions to the problem of the world. So that is why even the best of economists, when you put them in the place, they get into that place and they discover that, look, what they are thinking in the classroom is different from what is the reality in the market space. So we should all accept our humanity and know that all that we are trying to do is at best trying to see how we can provide solutions, but the whole solution is not within our reach. And this is because you have different school of thoughts. People say, okay, I'm socialist, this person is capitalist, and these are thinking the model of organizing the state to say, okay, I feel that if the state owns everything, it will be better off. And they say, no, if it is in the hands of the individual, it will be better off. But the solution is neither here nor there, because the value system of the people you are driving is also very important.
All right. How do you see this playing out? Maybe we'll just wrap up with this before we go to Japan. The former chairman of Federal Reserve, which is Bernanke, has Bank of England has appealed to him to review its policy.
Not his policy, his model.
His model, yeah.
Okay.
Which is going to be released in April. What might likely play out?
Yeah, even Bernanke is silent about it. Because calculation of expectation is not something that is easy. And he himself has said, in almost all the paper he has written, that it is just something that is based on, your speculations. So we can't take it as if it is 100% right. Yeah, but they are saying, of course, because every nation, central bank of the world are relying upon that model because it is one of the newest model in terms of economic thinking, and of course of the place he also had occupied in the Federal Reserve in America. So people are looking up to him. But we're also looking at it from 2002, for example, up to now, and see what the American economy is doing, even under the nose of Bernanke. So appealing him to change the model, not solving anything for the UK. But I think it's just the fact that most of the time, and I think that bureaus of statistics of nations need to be more pragmatic in terms of gathering of data for the analysis of economic reality. There are a whole lot of things that we must be able to factor into our thinking. We are dealing, for example, with a new generation called Gen Zs, who can wake up and take decisions without even looking at what is the implication and how it affects them. And as long as you say it on social media, they just hook and they run with it. So this is a problem. And that is why, for me, really, even states have to be very careful in terms of pronouncing the inflation figure. Because it can either make or mar the economy. People get to that point to say, oh, inflation is rising, and therefore there is no need to do it, because by the time they are doing the analysis, they say, oh, all the profit is eating up, and people become relaxed and lazy, and they don't want to get into productive venture because they are looking at it that, oh, if I put money, I'm going to lose it. Because of the figures that we are pushing out every month. And this is creating a whole lot of distortion in world economies. Because when you're saying, oh, inflation is going to rise, I am thinking, if this inflation is going to rise, what's going to happen to my money in the bank? So the value is going down. Abi? So I'm going to look for a currency where to hedge this money. And this is why you are seeing that globally, people are moving money away from the capital market. People are moving money away from the money market, and they are putting it in crypto. And I'm not sure that economists are also factoring this into the calculation of inflation and the rest of it. So this, for me, is where we stay today as a people. We must be able to look at what are the dynamics, what are the changes that are happening globally that is affecting the way demand and supply interacts in today's world.
So in the UK now, in handling this, the government is paying making cost of living payments to different categories of people. But the inflation is affecting those of low-income household and those of high-income household differently. Yeah. And taxes are also being increased. Does this compound the issue?
That is the point I've been making. You actually compounded the issue because, number one, you are funding laziness. That's what it is.
How is that funding laziness?
See, if you take money from X, you eat deep into his profit, and he's putting a whole lot of energy to make this profit. So you are increasing his tax, and you are making this man less productive. Now this person is thinking, what use is it for me to run a factory so that government can continue to tax me? This is the reason why you see companies are also altering their business models. Which, for example, one of the analyses that a lot of people have not looked at, when they say, oh, companies are leaving Nigeria because government policies are bad. Companies are leaving Nigeria because models are changing. Because the real incentive for companies to run is profit making. Now, if I'm doing business and I'm not making any profit and I'm incurring costs because government need to take more from me to help people who are doing nothing. So which means you are incentivizing laziness. And that was why I was saying to somebody yesterday, you see, if you look at the model that grew the world, you see, it is high productivity. We must forget the deception that came with socialism in Bolshevik Russia in the early 1990s. Now, you look at it. When Stalin, who actually drove the economy of Russia, came, though it was an economy that was policy that was based on socialism, which means those who are productive support those who are not productive. Everybody with a horse whip was forced to produce.
But in this case, is it about funding those who are not productive or those whose income are low? That the person's income is low doesn't mean that they are unproductive. You
see, it's not just about low income. You're also having an army. If you've been following the economy situation in the UK, you will discover there's a lot of people who are queuing on the streets, taking palliatives from government. Because we have designed the economy in a way, and that was what I was saying to one of our friends the other day. You look at it, that the promise of certification has actually altered the way the economy should actually naturally work. That people are thinking that until we have certificates, we cannot earn a living. And therefore, we are all given certificates to be on the streets, looking for a job that is not there, and then actually leaving the real economy behind. So this for me is what it is. So how should government incentivize productivity? That is the key question. To say, how are we going to do this distribution? Yes, people have to succor, good, but government must encourage production. And globally, not just in UK alone, in America, in the whole of Europe, in Asia, government is funding laziness. And this is taking too much burden on government. This is a problem. So as long as you continue to fund laziness by social interventions, and you are not encouraging people to work, people just wait and say, at the end of the month, now what happened now? I get some incentive. So I manage this, wait for the end of the month. So people are waiting for pay packages. We can start to begin to encourage entrepreneurship. And this is why I said, for example, our president was in Niger yesterday and was talking to the people. We want to solve the problem of poverty. How do we solve the problem of poverty? Solving the problem of poverty is to see everybody had to be involved. And this was the foundation for the growth of the capitalist economy across Europe. If you remember the doctrine of the Protestant ethics as propounded by Max Weber, that the Protestant ethics were preaching in the whole of Europe, John Calvin and the rest of them, that any man who does not work and eat is a thief. And therefore, people have to avoid being called thieves. And they have to find something to do so that they can earn a living by the day. And I think this is what the government needs to do. This is what really powered industrialization. And this is the only thing that can also solve the economic challenge that the world is immersed in today.
But wouldn't a full-scale capitalist economy almost seem like being insensitive to the plight of the poor?
I don't think so. I don't think so. See, nobody is designed by nature to be poor. All of us are designed by nature to be productive. And this is what it is, because God, who created all of us, had given us some certain measure of skill that we are able to produce something that is unique and peculiar to us, which we can share with other people. And that's why you see, if you look at even the trend and the models in economies, we started from trade by barter. Isn't that how the economy started? So you have yam, and I want cocoyam. So you give me your yam, and then I determine the size of cocoyam that I'm going to give to you. Now I need goats. He has goats. So I will come together and agree what size of cocoyam I will give to him so that I can get portion of his goats. So this is how nature designed the world. So we are exchanging something. Now, what is the problem today in the world is that we're having serious balance of trade deficits. And this is why nations are moving in terms of debt. Look at it, from 55% of GDP in 2010. As of today, debt to GDP in the UK is 95% because of the social interventions. So we must begin to think about the way nature created us from day one, which is to say that we have something that we are offering, this person has something that is offering, we exchange what we have, and then we have a good and common life. So this concept of throwing money at poverty and expect that will solve the problem, for me, is a no-no.
All right, this conversation reminds me of what our president said, let the poor breathe, because the essence of social intervention is to help the weak or the poor in society. But
I think what we're doing here at Souq is actually to tell people there are opportunities out there. There are a whole lot of things that we can do to better our lots. All we just need to do is to put on the thinking cap. But if we are stereotyped that we are poor and therefore we deserve to be pitied, then of course it's too bad. And I also remember that the president said to them in the US that African is not to be pitied. African needs to be collaborated with and given the opportunity to sell what it has. But selling that what we have requires that we have to put a lot of energy into production so that we have something to sell. And as we are doing this selling and we're having something to exchange, we have skills to exchange, then a lot will go well. And this is why we, of course, especially from the emerging economy, must begin to think about how we are going to encounter the knowledge economy as it is today. For example, in 2024 budget, the Japanese are putting up to 2 trillion yen to educate their adults to acquire artificial intelligence skills, because that's where the world is tilting toward. Now you are having AI doing all the work that journalists are doing. Have you? So what happens? The journalists are losing their jobs. So what should the journalists do? Must begin to create new skills that make them relevant in the scheme of things. So this is where investment in knowledge become very critical key to state survival. And unfortunately, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the UK, or even in our own climb here, there have been a declining investment in education.
All right.
And that won't help us so well.
We just have to leave the conversation here. You know, there will always be another time to expand this conversation. Thank you so much for your intervention, your thought, and your wise counsel as usual.
My pleasure.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.